Hey everyone, thank you for joining. Sorry about that audio. Do not travel to Cuba. No travel to Cuba. If you travel to Cuba, you are not just taking a huge health risk because the pandemic is hitting Cuba big time. It is not being reported. It is not being transparent. The numbers that the government is giving out to the World Health Organization and to other countries is completely wrong. It is completely not accurate. Do not travel to Cuba. There's whistleblower complaints and also ex-professionals in the field of the media. The media is controlled over there, so there's no freedom of. Remember, Cuba has no freedom of press and no freedom of speech. So these numbers are completely coming from the government, and there's reports. On average, Cuba reports around 23 new cases each day. Plus or minus. The truth is there's many people within the island, either from the medical field or from other sectors, saying that the reports are sometimes even 300 within one area of the country reported some days. So obviously they're manipulating the situation. So first of all, it is a huge health concern. Second of all, most importantly, you're also sponsoring daily human rights violations. You are helping the regime violate the human rights of people every day, especially the rights of freedom of speech and freedom of the press, which is the reason why you, a tourist or anybody going to the island, can never be have the confidence that you're being told the right information or the right safety knowledge to go to a country or to go to travel. There's nobody who wants to go more to the island than myself. There's I have a lot of loved ones, and I really love going to Cuba. But the truth is that will be one, it will not be a very wise decision because of your safety and the health concerns that you are facing. And then second, you also it is a critical time to let the regime, the dictatorship, know that they should not be abusing the human rights of people, and that they should allow for a system of civil rights within the island. There's constant abuses. You talk about police brutality that we in the international world and in democracy do not see each day, because again, there's very little internet access and very media access to those things. But there's many violations of police brutality. There's no avenue for independent reporters who decide to leave the censorship of the national media, which is the only one allowed in Cuba to report, for example, all the COVID cases and all the hardships that the island is going through. You'll be supporting the malnutrition of the Cuban people, because it's what's sustaining and retaining that government is the money that they're getting from tourism. Cuba is about to go into the tourism time of October, November, December. January is the winter. It's when Cuba gets the most amount of tourism from outside, from anywhere in the world, because they go there because of the great weather and the great beaches and the exoticness of the island. Many people, when they go to Cuba, they feel that they're going to have a fantasy experience of what the 1950s kind of looked like. The problem is that it's all a fallacy. It's all false. In It's like a Hollywood show where you see in the outside you see the 1950s, but in the truth it's the 2020 of what communism looks in the world, of people not getting good healthcare. The healthcare is a complete another facade. Tourists get a different treatment than the 11 million people in the island. And now we're seeing the best evidence of that with this pandemic, how they're manipulating the numbers and how you cannot trust when you decide to, or anybody may decide to go to Cuba. They have to know from us, from the community that's connected to our Cuban brothers and sisters. They got to know the risk they're taking. Cuba was under complete lockdown for 2 months, and the numbers were kind of bigger than they are now. So now the numbers look a lot um, tinier. But we know from those whistleblower complaints, there is a big expansion, a bigger hotspot within the island, and they just open up the whole island because they need that money so bad, because they need people to come and spend their dollars on travel to the island. That's how they survive. That's how they can stay in power. So my best advice to you is, again, no travel to Cuba. Not just that, Cuba is a level 4. It's a level 4 by the U.S. State Department safety safety danger. So what that means is the one, obviously many of you may know that the Cuban consulate, I mean the American embassy in Cuba got attacked. We don't know much about that attack, but what we do know is that the attacks happened in some hotels where tourists like you and me may go to stay at one day. Hotel Nacional in Havana and El Capri, the two most, probably one of the two most famous hotels within the country. Those hotels were family members. They did not attack just embassy U.S. personnel. They attacked family members who suffered some minor and some limited health concerns from those attacks in places of where the public, any tourists, well, they're the most troubled places for tourists to go within Havana. And those of you who have gone before know this. So my message is there's also that concern for Americans, but for any international traveler, and they were not just Americans, Canadians were also affected by this attack. But most importantly, again, you are sponsoring. Unfortunately, any money you spend in Cuba stays within the island, and they need dollars more now than ever. Again, no travel to Cuba. It is critical. This is a time where, for the last 3 years, quite honestly, the dictatorship has not seen as much of money from the dissidents or from from the exile community that usually helps their families. That money has decreased because of the efforts of the Cubans outside of Cuba, out of the population outside of Cuba, which is about 3 million Cubans that live outside of Cuba. We support our families, we help our families, and we still do. But we just have shown an initiative to do the very best for us to try to just buy food and necessary products so that our families survive. But for that doesn't trickle down to the government. Unfortunately, though, every penny that we spend in dollars or euros goes to the dictatorship. Make no mistake about it. Every single dollar goes to the dictatorship. So, with that said, I gotta be honest. Don't travel to Cuba. There's also there's also a sense of that Cuba's a paradise, and that Cuba is this place where everybody lives a good life, and it's and that's the experience you get as a tourist, and it's nothing but from the truth from that. So let me get some messages here from some people. Um, thank you, Mercedes. Thank you, Carlos. Thank you, Juan. Thank you, Carlos again. Maria, thank you all so much for joining. I want you to just keep this little message. No trouble to Cuba, first of all, because one, your health is at risk. You cannot trust the dictatorship with the numbers they're giving you out, in this case because of COVID, but later on with anything else they tell you. There's no freedom of the press or of speech in Cuba, so the public is not going to be able to tell your story if something happens to you within the island, or it will be very difficult to do so. You're good as long as you're a tourist. You have different rights. You do have privileges that Cubans don't have. But if something happens with you, Cubans will not be able to, you know, put that out to the international community or to your country because, like again, there is a communist regime there that will try to impair that. So you'll be lucky if you can get your message out in case anything goes wrong. Like I said, I'm somebody who wants anyone to be able to visit Cuba, but unfortunately, it is not time to travel to Cuba. It is not the right thing to do for your own good, for your health, for your safety, and for most importantly, those people you're visiting, that culture you want to enjoy and experience. There is many things that typically happen within the island that you will never know about. If there's an attack, or of individuals where somebody gets stabbed, or there's a uprest somewhere, you will not hear about it. Again, the press is completely dominated by the dictatorship, and the free press, which is independent reporters who bravely, many of them are in prison. When they'll try to tell the story, but it will not get to you. The information does not travel within Cuba. It travels outside. Internet access, if you're staying in a hotel, which I hope you don't, because hotels are completely limited only to the dictatorship. So that money goes straight into the dictatorship. and to that government that oppresses people, that in a hotel you will get internet access, but anything you do in Cuba is being watched. Anything you do in Cuba is being censored. There's people that will not be able to come and spend time with you, because if a police officer or anybody within that structure of the military system sees you, that person may get in trouble. In some cases, people in Cuba get in trouble when that kind of stuff happens. Um, as I go along, I want to also bring you some things that are happening with COVID in the island, right? That you probably should know. In case, so you know what I'm talking about. So, example, there was at the beginning of the pandemic, with when every country was closing, when every country, the U.S., even China, started closing their borders, it took about 2.5, 3 more weeks for Cuba to close their borders, and they were still promoting travel to the island. They were still telling people to come and get, to come and do tours in the island. There was a destination where COVID hadn't hit yet, and then the warm weather. I know many of us have criticized some leaders for talking about how COVID disappears and how the warm weather takes it away and doesn't exist. Well, guess what? That's what Cuba was doing. Cuba supposedly is known for being a great state with their health system, and they have always have the great practices. Well, guess what? Those great practices were asking for people from anywhere in the country, from anywhere in the world, to visit the island. Why? Because it's like, at the end, even though they're communist, they only really care about the money. All this big, all this people within that hierarchy over there on the top of the government, they're all depending on that money to live, to buy yachts, to send their kids to the best universities, to send their kids outside of Cuba to Europe and many other places in the world to live, because they know that the end is coming. They know that the dictatorship is not going to end. Is not going to last forever, and they know that cycle is coming, so they're preparing it, and they're using your money, any tourist who goes, to do so. Not just that, they're also using the money to oppress people, to limit more freedoms. When the Obama administration opened some ways for the internet, they decided to make the internet so expensive that only the people basically who have anyone outside of Cuba, either outside of Cuba, who can send them, money, are the only ones that actually can buy the access to be in the internet and to be able to give, to be on social media and things like that. And that's very limited. That's only for most Cubans, less than an hour a day that they can actually open up the window and see what's going on. And like I said, that's only like a fraction of Cubans that can actually do that. I know I talk a lot about this, but really do not travel to Cuba. It will be honestly overriding anything that the Cubans outside of Cuba have pushed for in the last year. We're trying to really limit any extra funding that government gets. We're trying to really help our people within Cuba to wake up and to ask for their rights to be heard, and ask for their freedom. And what happens is, when tourists comes in, that's the only main industry right now in Cuba. That Cuba doesn't produce anything anymore. They're only there to do service to tourists. And like I said, it is a form of slavery right now. It is a form of modern slavery. That money is used to pay the medical personnel and doctors and within Cuba to go do work outside, outside in international missions, and really they only paid a fraction of that, maybe 10% at best, and the other 90% is kept among the generals and the people higher up in the government. So the summary of the new do not travel to Cuba is pretty simple, y'all. The summary is, if you travel to Cuba, one, you're putting your health at risk. Second, it is not completely safe to you, because if they hurt family members from an embassy in Canada and an embassy in the U.S., who's to say that they can't one day, if anything is going on, hurt anyone from any other nation. Third, you're funding daily human rights violations. You're funding abuse from from the police and from the military infrastructure against the opposition, against any dissident, against anybody who's trying to get the word out. And remember, this is not just people from the regular public. This is people who are, independent reporters who are trying to do, free press, and they're getting oppressed. They're getting cops outside their house for 2 3 hours. Guess who pays that? The tourists pay that. When we go and we spend money, we are paying that. So unfortunately, our money is being used not in the right things. It's not being used to help all those people we see who are struggling to, move around the island. If you have ever gone to Cuba, you'll see that in every little town, outside of the town, there's groups of people trying to get any type of transportation to move on to the next town. Well, guess what? Cuba has never really tried to fix their transportation problem because they want people to be limited. They don't want people to be mingling with you. They don't want people to be telling you really how life is. When I gone to Cuba and I've been able to take any or share my time with anybody with from outside of Cuba, we've gone to the nice parts of Cuba and to the beaches and all that stuff, but we've also gone to the small towns, and the perspective is completely different. And for those of you that don't get it and that say that only the Cuban people are impacted by tourists not going, well, let me tell you something. Only actually that's false, because when you are taking any Cuban to buy anything, or you're spending time and you're buying their some products for the house, or you're taking them around so they can experience the time with you, you're spending more money in establishment or in a place that is owned by the dictatorship. So that money still trickles down to the system. We're doing this for a period of time. Hopefully, many of you here, it's not just me doing it. There's many people out there doing it. Otaola has a calling for this. Otaola is a big influencer right now in the Cuban community outside of Cuba, who of Cuban exiles, who's trying to promote this. The reason I joined is because I think it's critical. I think because of COVID being honestly a risk for any of you, more than also it's also a time to see the difference that lack of tourism within Cuba is going to cause. And they're about to open up. You'll see in the next month that they're going to start recruiting. If you go to any website, they're going to open up any types of recruitment efforts to bring tourists to the island. Many offers, many great packages, many fake advertisement of exchanges within Cubans and tourists. And anyone who lives in tourism knows that there's a world for the tourist, and there's another world for any Cuban who lives within the island. And unfortunately, when we go, we are conscious that we are helping that maintain itself, and we're helping for that to stay. Let me keep saying some hi to some people. Maria, thank you again. I see Carlos. Carlos, I thank you so much. There is a link later on if anybody wants to join. I have the State Department has issued this level 4. You know what level 4 means? There's level 1, level 2, level 3, and level 4. Level 4 is a red code. That means that the U.S. is kind of telling you, any person in the world, but especially Americans, that there might not be much they can do for you. All right. We have the case of Alan Gross, who was in prison for 5 years, and it took the Obama administration to trade away 5 Cubans spies within the U.S. that they have captured. I mean, spies. They were like actually doing attacks within the U.S. to benefit Cuba. Okay, so they had to trade 5 spies, Cuban spies, for one American that was within the island and that was in prison for almost 5 years. Okay, that's what I'm talking to you about. Who's to say that that cannot be you next time? Because when you go to a place, sometimes I will tell you this: whenever you do go, and hopefully sooner than later, but hopefully after, we're able to get the Cuban people to wake up and understand, that we need to at least do some efforts to start to really create some change within Cuba. Um, and it's a critical time. Plus, again, most importantly, it's not safe for you to do so. We want you to know that could be you. I mean, who's to say that you don't fall? With you don't want to. Maybe you want to help some Cubans that you interacted within the island, or maybe you want to do something for Cuba because you fall in love with the island or for the country and for the people. Like all of us are. That's why we're here. That's why I'm doing a live. That's why many people chat on the chat. That's why many people are trying to promote freedom within the island, is because we have a lot of passion and a lot of love for the for Cuba, not for the government, not for the dictatorship, but for Cuba itself. But who's to say that they use you as a trading stock to get some outcome that they cannot get right now. So you have that concern. The American embassy is not there for you because they've left because of the what the issues they had, the attacks they've had. Like I said, the attacks were not just on the embassy; they were on family members. I mean, they took the audacity to attack family members that were staying at hotels that are known world known for international travel to stay in. They had no discretion. Okay, so this is what we're talking about with this video and this live I'm doing is to really let people know why not to travel to Cuba, why it is a huge safety concern, why you should be very, very careful in making this decision. Please talk to a Cuban. Like I said, I used to go to Cuba all the time. So I'm not like no purist. I'm not one of those guys telling you never go back. No, 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 no. I'm telling you this is not the time. There's a huge, again, health concern for anybody. You should not trust any numbers that they're telling you because they're not true. And we got evidence to show you to tell you that's not true. We can explain and show you videos of what happens when they're trying to find COVID-19 tracing and how in some communities they are very restrictive and in some they're not. And people, and really they do it on the communities that are honestly, where they do this in the communities that are a little that there's some protest or there's some discomfort or there's the people are kind of asking for their rights. That's the ones they target first when they try to use the COVID-19 excuse to put them in quarantine in these places that are not even they wouldn't even pass any inspection of the FDA or of any international organization that cares about a place so that is clean and that is proper for a virus. So like I said, I'm going around and around in circles, but the main point, very, very, very strongly suggest you to not travel to Cuba. You will be facing restrictions that you're never seeing. There's people who get that when you come to Cuba, you may receive. There might be some fines because there's heavy restrictions in travel to Cuba anyway. It is level 4. Like I said, level 4 is the highest level of danger to go to an island. And why do I bring that on a Sunday night? Because again, you're going to see in the next months a huge effort by the dictatorship to sell you on going to Cuba, to tell you how good the island is and how good of a safe place it is to not be around COVID when it's quite the opposite. Do not fall for it. Do not buy it. Cuba is the China of the Caribbean right now when it comes down to transparency. And you may be putting yourself at more risk than anywhere in the States, to be honest with you. The States, we have high numbers, but we report them, and people, people get treated, and they're, and you at least know what's what and where the hot spots are at. And in Cuba, a lot of people with COVID do not get testing, and they determine the hotspots. But they never are transparent with the numbers. They never really tell you where they're at. You could be in, traveling, maybe in part of Cuba and not know that you're just traveling into a hotspot as you're doing so. So that's very, 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 very important. Know all those things. I want to give a brief update on the president of the United States went out and he also did a runabout. I think he says that he's going to talk more about, he's learned a lot about the virus itself. But what the reason I bring him up, I'm glad he's doing great and things are going well with him. But the reason is that in the last 3 years, there has been a lot of efforts that have really helped this movement right now of telling people the truth about traveling to Cuba and what you're doing when you do so. And what that's doing, it's getting people, and it's also he has put some great restrictions and great um, sanctions on Cuban, on Cuban officials that are really dealing with the money and the purse of the island. And those officials have faced, bank freezes, and they're right now on one leg. They're really on the last stages. And like I said, the people of Cuba are finally waking up and finding ways to communicate their frustrations and their oppression and their um, and all the limitations that they have because of that government. And right now, you could really, really help the Cuban cause if you decide to not travel to Cuba. No travel to Cuba is a hashtag, as you see out there. It's also it's also a an ask we're doing. It's also I can say that probably around 60% of Cubans outside of Cuba probably support this effort. So obviously, nothing in life can be 100%. This is what we want, but 60% of Cuban Americans do want to people to know that we don't want tourist trouble to Cuba right now. We want it in the future. We are going to be a nation that is always going to love for anyone throughout the world to come visit, and we are always going to be a tourist destination. But right now, that fantasy and that exotic island, it's that trouble experience and those memories may not be as great as they could be because you may be putting yourself at risk. It is something that you need to watch out for. It is not a good idea to do so. So anyway, I don't want to go more around the bush. I wanted to tell you exactly how it is. This is Jose Views. If you have any questions, you can always send me a message on Facebook or a message on Jose Morales Perez, or you can always send me on subscribe to my channel and just send me a comment there. I will bring this issue up again in another, in all the other things I do. But today's message from the Cuban American politics scenario is we are asking any tourist in the world to please do not travel to Cuba. It is not safe, and it's also not the right thing to do because it is critical at this junction in history for our country that you support the efforts of freedom and that you support the strides that we're making to try to see if we can limit or impair that dictatorship's funding enough to get them to either get out or to get them to commit mistakes that will hopefully be enough for us to overcome, the censorships, the freedom of press, and the freedom of liberties, the freedom of assembly, the freedom of speech, the freedom of thinking, the human rights, most importantly. So I hope that many of you have a great week. I hope you keep this message. I hope you share it. I hope you tell others that there is a lot of Cubans telling people to not travel to Cuba right now, nor in the near future. It is not going to benefit you. And most importantly, you will be helping a true cause of freedom, a true cause of prosperity, a true cause of helping solve human rights violations and of improving the well-being of many citizens of the world. So take care. Have an awesome Sunday. Have an awesome week. And we'll be here in check with you. Take care. Ciao, ciao.